Diamo subito inizio alla conferenza stampa del dottor Estulin su richiesta del nostro gruppo Libertà e Democrazia. È assente per motivi di salute il presidente onorevole Ferrari. Porto anche i saluti del capo della delegazione della Lega Nord e saluto ovviamente i colleghi parlamentari che sono voluti intervenire a questa conferenza stampa. Io ruberò poco tempo, anche perché ce l'hanno rubato già molti maleducatamente quelli che ci hanno preceduto, e voglio soltanto sottolineare l'importanza della presenza del dottor Estulin, Daniel Estulin, che oggi il più famoso giornalista di inchiesta europeo che è riuscito ad entrare nei Sancta Sanctorum di una delle organizzazioni mondialiste più importanti, forse la più importante, il Bilderberg il club Bilderberg, del quale ha rivelato con un'opera uscita 3 anni fa negli Stati Uniti e che ha ormai edizioni in decine e decine di paesi di tutto il mondo, e la cui presenza oggi è molto importante perché siamo alla vigilia, durerà 3 giorni a partire da domani in Spagna, una riunione decisiva di questo gruppo occulto di potere economico, finanziario e politico, di cui il nostro ospite, gradito ospite, riesce oggi a darci in anteprima mondiale il programma, quello che non leggerete, non avreste letto se non ci fosse stata questa conferenza stampa sui giornali di domani mattina. Saluto i parlamentari della Lega Nord, Scotta, e ringrazio anche tutti i funzionari del nostro gruppo che hanno reso possibile il successo di questa iniziativa. La parola al dottor Estulin.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. My name is Daniel Estulin. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now in a position to change history. I finally believe that mankind has a future. A once demoralized population with no moral purpose is coming out of a prolonged slumber. In this general awakening, people are beginning to ask the right questions. It is no longer what will I get out of it, but rather what's right. It's an international phenomenon of response and reaction to an overly felt perception that the entire world is doomed to catastrophe unless we, the people, do something about it. I've written a book on the subject of the Bilderberg Group. This book, in a way, has become the catalyst for a movement around the world. Now, we don't have a lot of time, so I would like to explain to you what Bilderberg is and why it must be stopped. And also, I would like to start with saying to you that Bilderberg is the old NATO alliance. It was born in 1954 as a group, basically what they themselves call the aristocracy of purpose between American and Western European alliances on the best ways to manage the planet. We're talking about the presidents and prime ministers of every European nation, Prime Minister of Canada, President of the United States. We're talking about the leading 50, 60 CEOs of the world's most powerful corporations. We're talking about the European royalty, commissioners, senators, congressmen. And of course, we're talking about the world's leading press, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journals, Time Magazine, Le Monde from France, Grupo Prisa from Spain, which is one of the reasons we might not hear a lot about the Bilderbergers, or actually the group, until I've written a book on them, because these organizations, media organizations, are sworn to secrecy. Now, it's very interesting that a lot of the Bilderbergers, a lot of the attendees, members of the European Parliament, also members of the Bilderberger Inner Circle. I'm talking about Barroso, who's a member of Bilderberg. I'm talking about Van Rompuy, who attended last year's Bilderberg meeting, gave a brilliant speech, or at least that's what the Bilderbergers thought. And shortly after, he became the man in Europe. We're talking about Jean-Claude Trichet, also member of the Bilderberg. We're talking about Peter Sutherland from England. From England, I'm sorry, I meant to say Ireland. And again, these are officials unelected by anyone who represent people, apparently 500 million people in Europe. Again, they're not working for the interests of nation-state republics. We're going to talk about nation-states. We're going to talk about the future of Europe. They rather represent the very small interests of a very powerful group of people, and unknown in most circles, called the Bilderbergers. Now, in the world of international finance, there's those who steer the events and those who react to the events. While the latter are better known, they're greater in numbers and seemingly more powerful. True power rests with the former. And at the center of this global financial system are the oligarchy, today represented by the Bilderberg Group. Now, Bilderberg organization is dynamic in that it changes with the times, absorbs and creates new parts while excreting the remains of the decaying parts. Members come and go, but the system itself has not changed. It is a self-perpetuating system, a virtual spider web of interlocked financial, political, economic, and industry interests. Now, Bilderberg isn't a secret society. It's not an evil, all-seeing eye. There's no conspiracy, even though a lot of people with their infantile fantasies see it as such. No group of people, I don't care how powerful they are, sit around a table in a dark room, holding hands, staring at a crystal ball, planning the world's future. It is a meeting of people who represent a certain ideology. That ideology isn't a one-world government or new world order, as too many people mistakenly believe. Rather, the ideology of one world company limited. Back in 1968, at the Bilderberg meeting in Canada, George Ball was then the Undersecretary for Economic Affairs with JFK and Johnson. He said, "Where does one find a legitimate base for the power of corporate management to make decisions that can profoundly affect the economic life of nations to whose governments they have only limited responsibility?" Now, the idea behind each and every Bilderberg meeting is to create, as I said before, what they call the aristocracy of purpose between European and North American elites on the best ways to manage the planet. In other words, the creation of a global network of giant cartels, more powerful than any nation on earth, destined to control the necessities of life of the rest of humanity, obviously from their vantage point for our own good and our own benefit, because to them, we the people are the great unwashed. That's what they call us. Now, the reason people don't believe in Bilderberg and other organizations working together, exercising such control on the world stage, is that theirs is a Cartesian fantasy world in which the isolated intentions of some individuals, instead of the dynamics of social processes, shape the course of history as the movement of evolving ideas and themes over successive generations and even centuries. Now, Bilderberg is a medium of bringing together financial institutions which are the world's most powerful and most predatory financial interests, and at this time, it is that combination which is the worst enemy of humanity. I think we can all congratulate ourselves in that today Bilderberg has become the mainstay of corporate media, and not because corporate media has suddenly remembered the responsibility to us, the people, but because we, the people, have forced them into an uncomfortable position by becoming very aware that presidents and prime ministers and your little shrinking queens and kings are puppets of powerful forces working from behind the scenes. Something has happened to us, the people in the midst of this general economic collapse. People at large are gripped by something they don't always understand, but it compels them to act in a certain way in their own interest. That's why they're doing in Greece, and that's what they're doing in Spain, and that's what they're doing in the United States. It's called anthropic principle. It's like a tidal movement came upon us and washed away our fears. As people realize that their existence is threatened, they have lost their fear, and Bilderberg and others are beginning to sense it. Perhaps that's why in a recent Council on Foreign Relations speech in Montreal, Zbigniew Brzezinski, one of the founders of the Trilateral Commission, warned that a global political awakening in combination with infighting amongst the elite was threatening to derail the move towards a one-world government. You see, people at this table come from very different ideological and political backgrounds. Now, what unites us, however, is that we're all patriots. All those who oppose us, those who work for secret societies, who have sold their nations out for a pound of flesh, they're traitors. Not only traitors of their people and nation, but also traitors of humanity as a whole. Now, the subject of this press conference is Bilderberg towards One World Company Limited. About 650 years ago, the economy of Europe had collapsed into what is known as Europe's New Dark Age, the greatest economic and demographic collapse of Europe since the collapse of the Roman Empire. But then in the middle of the 14th century, much of the power of the oligarchy who ruled the world then suddenly and abruptly disintegrated. This disintegration erupted as a sudden chain reaction collapse of the worst financial bubble of debt speculation in history until now, that is, when the banking houses of Bardi and Peruzzi went under. This disintegration or collapse of the Lombard debt bubble caused a collapse in the power amongst the oligarchical families. Now, what does it have to do with Bilderberg? You see, modern history supersedes medieval history at that point or moment that the institutions which singularly distinguished modern from medieval were put into place. And that occurred back in 1439 at the Council of Florence.